George Polk Award, the Pulitzer Prize, the MacArthur Fellowship, the Peabody Award, and for her most recent film, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival. She also had a major solo exhibition, Astro Noise, at the Whitney in 2016. When I thought about who could introduce today's film, I immediately thought of Laura. Much of her work is about the ways in which institutions use access to information as a way of controlling the individual. And as a filmmaker, Laura challenges viewers to engage and make connections and think for themselves about what things mean. All of that, of course, is also present in the conversation. I certainly don't know anyone else who knows more about privacy and spying and how secrets are kept and revealed than Laura. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say about one of my favorite films. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laura Poitras.
There's a cooking. I'll take the cooking. Very efficient. Means I don't know, maybe I don't need a cooking. So first of all, I just want to thank John Vanko. I mean, he's one of the great champions of filmmakers in cinema, and has been just doing tremendous work to keep our business alive. And the fact that he's here programming at the Paris is just so fantastic, so it's wonderful to be here. I love this series, so you should come to as much of it as you can. Try to come to as many of these films as you can. I mean, it's really, when I saw the list, I was like, wow, all of these films, some of my favorite. All of them sort of in this, or not all of them, but some of them in this sort of genre, the sort of the paranoid thriller, like Parallax View, like the film you're about to see. And then some fabulous, John Waters, Female Trouble, Badlands, etc. So I just want to say a few words about this film. First of all, can I do who hasn't seen The Conversation? Who's here? Oh wow, okay. This is really, this is going to be fantastic. I mean, this is a movie, for those of you who didn't raise your hands, you've probably seen it many more times than, than we can count. It's just a film you return to over and over again, so you're in for a treat to see this. I just want to give a bit of context around the production of the film. So Francis Ford Coppola made this film. He actually wrote the script in the late 60s, and he couldn't get it financed. And it was only after the success of Godfather 1 that he convinced Paramount to pony up the money. And he managed to do it in the middle of Godfather 1 and 2. He was actually, during the editing, he was shooting Godfather 2. Both films were released in 74. Both were nominated for Academy Award for Best Picture, and Godfather 2 winning. So it was quite a busy year for Francis Ford Coppola. The film premiered at Cannes Film Festival, where it won the Palme d'Or, and was released theatrically in April following. It was also nominated for original screenplay and best sound. So the premise of the film, so Coppola talks about two things that inspired him. One was Blow Up by Antonioni, which is sort of also a mystery thriller about the kind of an accidental recording of a potential crime that sort of sets the protagonist off on a journey. He talks about that, and he was very interested in how repetition could be used in a film, and repetition as exposition, or instead of exposition. So as you'll see, there's certain sound that you'll be hearing over and over again. So unlike Blow Up, which is about the visual image and finding sort of the secrets within the image, this is using sound to do so. The germ of the story, he says, is that he learned that there was microphones that were capable of recording people's audio in crowded situations, a sort of new technology, and that was sort of the premise. He thought that would be an interesting idea for a story, and decided to double down on the role of the eavesdropper, who was played by Gene Hackman. So there's a lot of technical innovation in this film. This film, Walter Murch had worked on sound editing, and he was a film editor as well as working on sound, and there's a lot of innovation that was sort of developed in this film. There are a couple really extraordinary zoom shots that you see, slow zooms. One is the opening of the film, and later an incredible shot in a bathroom that used a sort of a computerized zoom so that you could set sort of the slowness of it. The opening, I think it's one of the great openings of a film. You'll see in a minute when I say that. And it was shot that you had the actors that were in the environment, and many of the people who were also in the environment were filmed documentary style. They didn't know they were part of a movie, they were hidden cameras that were being recorded, and the action was sort of unfolding within that. It's also, I think, really innovative, obviously, its use of sound and Murch's editing, and the use of sort of Murch, if you read what he talks about the empty frame as being used throughout the film. So there are many scenes where there'll be an empty frame, and then the protagonist will enter it, and that Coppola was interested in how the camera could almost be itself as sort of used as a surveillance tool. So rather than being sort of always following the protagonist, oftentimes it's acting like weirdly out of sync. So the Hackman will leave camera, the camera stays on the frame for a long time and then sort of pivots to find him. It actually reminds me, I was thinking about it as I was preparing for this, one of, I think, the great recent films, Zone of Interest, for its technical innovation, yeah. I mean, that's a film that Jonathan Glazer really interrogated every step of the way and made actually two separate films, the sort of the film you see and the film you hear. And I think the kind of innovation that's in that film, I think we'll be talking about that film in 50 years. So political context, so we can't look at this film without sort of understanding the political context. I mean, Coppola wrote it in the 60s, but when it was released was at the height of the Watergate scandal, had been in the news, front page news for years, and Nixon resigned in the summer of '74. So this was very sort of in the zeitgeist. But Coppola also talks about it that he felt he was a bit ahead of the time. He didn't know that these things were happening, and a lot of the technology that you see in the film was actually authentic to the technology that would have been used in, for instance, Nixon's recording of in the Oval Office, and Hal Lipset, who was a technologist who advised Coppola, was also brought in at some point to sort of review the Nixon tapes and the missing 17 minutes. Okay, so then I'm going to end on sort of talking about like my personal resonance or connection to this film. As John said in the introduction, I've been focusing on issues of surveillance. Surveillance is a form of power, and it's a form of violence that's used by states and corporations and powerful individuals to instill fear, distrust, and is often a precursor to physical violence or other kinds of violence. And the way that he captures this, there's the protagonist who is, in a sense, the perpetrator of surveillance, and these tools at some point become used against him, or he starts to understand how those tools can be used against him. In terms of sort of psychological landscapes, and people talk about this film and the parallax view, and they use the word paranoia, but it's a complicated word because paranoia sort of suggests something that's not there, and actually surveillance is very real. And when I was working on the reporting on the NSA, I knew I was under surveillance at that time. I was living in Berlin. I had colleagues who had connections in German intelligence, and they said I was quote unquote lit up like a Christmas tree, which means that everything that I was doing was being monitored. At some point, I didn't even feel comfortable or safe typing into a computer that was connected to the internet because I felt it was sort of directly being sort of seen by someone else, and I don't think I was making these things up. And so this kind of the psychological landscape that Coppola creates with this character, it definitely really resonates. And I'll leave it there. I mean, this is just one of the great works of cinema that I return to over and over, and I really hope you like it. So thanks.